at today's meeting, Netanyahu telling President Biden there that Israel would do everything it could to avoid harming civilians, but said Hamas had no regard for Palestinian lives, and Biden saying that the United States would continue to have Israel's back. And as you heard, a lot of what's coming there. Let's discuss this with Zimbabwean academic Professor Ibbo Mandaza. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's start with news just in. The U.S. vetoing a UN Security Council resolution that's calling for humanitarian pauses in the conflict to allow for aid into Gaza. How do you react?
Well, shocking, but not surprising, given the attitude of the U.S. and its Western powers on the issue of the Palestinian question. Not surprising at all. Equally not surprising, even though shocking, was the visit by Biden to Israel today, and the kind of commitments and even reckless attempt to deflect responsibility of the Israelis for the attack on the hospital yesterday. Yes, so I'm not surprised at the veto by the U.S. That's in keeping with their policy in Israel.
And of course, there's, this particular conflict, and it's something that you also wrote about on Twitter as soon as we saw this, the news of this particular hospital and what happened there, is that, this conflict has clearly divided the world. And some say that it depends who you talk to for their views. But certainly there's a lot to be said, even about just the bombardment of that particular hospital and the lives that have now been lost.
Yes, not to mention the lives which have been lost over the last 2 decades, since 2004, as the Israelis have willy-nilly attacked Gaza and even the Western Bank with impunity. And the significance of this time round is that we have these contrasting responses on the part of the West to the Russia-Ukraine and Israeli-Gaza conflicts. These have really highlighted and put in strong profile the extent to which the hypocrisy of the West with respect to issues of human rights and indeed to the historical question of Palestine.
And there's been conflicting reports, especially when we see what happened in the hospital. The Israeli Defense Forces saying, denying any involvement in the hospital attack. Instead, they're blaming what they call a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group. What are you reading into this?
Well, it's sheer stupidity, given the extent to which the Israelis have been building up their forces on the border with Gaza, and what proof is there? Clearly, Hamas have made it clear that this was an Israeli strike, and why should we be surprised at that? I mean, the Israeli, and especially the Netanyahu, made it very clear that they're going to clean out Gaza, and as revenge. So we're not surprised at all. And even if it was incidental or accidental, the point is that this is happening in the context of a conflict in which the Israelis are bent on punishing Gaza for the events of the 7th of October.
And given just how deeply divided, opinions are and sides are when it comes to the world in this particular conflict, how then, in your view, can it be resolved?
First and foremost is that we, the world, must, and especially us Africans, must become aware of the origins of the Jewish question or the Palestinian question. The Jewish question is a European problem. The Europeans had been over the centuries massacring those they viewed as Jews, and what they've done systematically is to transfer the guilt to the Palestinians, on whom was imposed an Israeli state in 1948. You should also know that previously, the Europeans, and particularly the British, had tried to find a home for the Jews variously in the Sinai, at a place called El Arish, an area in the Sinai Peninsula, then in Cyprus, of course, in the Sinai Peninsula, the Egyptians objected. Then in Cyprus, there was fear of provoking both Turkish and Greeks here on that island. And then later, you won't believe it, Uganda was proposed as a possible home for the Jews. Well, this is to highlight the extent to which the Israeli state is very much a creation. While one acknowledges the need for the so-called homeland for the Jews, one must raise question as to why it has to be at the expense of another people, the Palestinians. And that is really the question. And we must push as Africans and the free world, and I mean the free world, I mean precisely the opposite of what Mr. Biden is talking about. You can see that the rhetoric out of Netanyahu, reference to the civilized world, is clearly to create a contrast, a contradiction between the Western world and the rest of us on this planet.
Yeah.
And I think as long as it's the position, which has been highlighted in the recent Gaza conflict, we have to say this, and very poignantly so, there will be no resolution of the Palestinian question until those who created the problem, the US and the Europeans, resolve it. And indeed, there will be no peace in the Middle East, no peace for Israel itself until this question is resolved.